On this episode of Rock School Proprietor Podcast, I make a big announcement. I wrote a book. It's called Complete Guitar Strumming. It's a focus on rhythm and timing for beginner to intermediate guitar players. Mandy and I discuss why I wrote the book and the origins, and how listeners can get a free copy, plus the instructor companion guide that lays out best practices for use with students. Welcome to Rock School Proprietor Podcast. My name's John Kozicki.
And I'm Mandy York.
Mandy, why don't you tell me, you were telling me this earlier, about when you started learning ukulele.
Yeah.
How long had you been a musician when you decided you were going to learn?
To pick up the ukulele?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I mean, do we have to talk about
decades?
How old I am?
Let's just say
decades.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Long enough.
Long enough.
You had enough experience with singing.
Yep.
Woodwind instruments.
Yep. I was out of college when I picked up the ukulele.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You had some piano
Yep.
when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those.
Yes.
But never stringed instrument.
No. Never played a string instrument.
Okay.
No. I've talked about my dad. He played guitar. Still does all the time. But I played wind instruments. I played the flute and sang. But when I got into early childhood music, I wanted to occasionally have something to pick up in the classroom. I will play the flute on occasion, maybe for a lullaby, but that's not, you can't sing and play the flute at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Ukulele is great for the early childhood classroom. So it seemed simple enough to use. I can read music. I'm a musician. This is great. So I bought a ukulele. I bought a method book. And I, quickly went through chapter after chapter, figured out how to play the chords. It really wasn't difficult. It was like kind of what I expected. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Put your fingers on these strings, on these frets.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you make chords, left-hand stuff.
Exactly. And I hadn't read tab before, but I knew enough to figure that out and could read it. And I didn't honestly work hard enough to stretch all my fingers to get every single chord.
Yeah.
Right. But I could play, several chords, and there were several songs that I could play using those chords.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, I'm ready to go. But I couldn't figure out what to do with my right hand. Right. So that was tricky for me. Like wind instruments, my voice, I'm working with melody, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't think about this picking up the ukulele. Like, what do I do with my right hand? I just don't down strum every chord. I mean, that's how I was learning a song as I was learning the chords, but it was like, wait, how do they do this? I don't know if you remember. I even asked you. It was a long time ago.
Right.
It's like, John, what do I do? And you're kind of looked at me. What do you mean? And you gave me ideas, and that's what I needed. I just needed those patterns in my right hand.
Yeah.
To figure out how to play a song.
So I think that the right hand, the strumming hand, is often, I don't want to say neglected, because it's not neglected, but it so much focus is on the left hand when it comes to guitar and ukulele. When I started teaching guitar, I think I've mentioned I learned how to teach by jumping in. My philosophy, I remember going into my very first day of teaching guitar, no training, I wasn't given any training. I was shown where the room is. My philosophy was all right, well, I guess if I stay 1 week ahead of the student, I'll be good. And so I was that green. And in the first good probably year of maybe a little bit more teaching guitar, I tried a ton of different method books because I thought all right, well, I don't really know what I'm doing here. But when I started guitar, I was given a method book early on. When I took piano lessons, I was given method books. So I figured, all right, well, let's try a method book. I tried tons of method books, but I always felt that they were so focused on the left hand. And then when it came time to when it came to strumming and coordinating left-hand chord changes with your right hand strumming and things like timing. There was almost nothing in those method books. You'd get a little bit of this, the symbols for down strum, up strum. But I just felt like, man, this is just not really giving students what they need. It's not giving me what I need as an instructor. I was taking some drum lessons, and at one point, I was probably teaching a little over a year, and I was taking some drum lessons, and it's all focused on rhythms, and it's all very repetitive, and it's all about coordinating your limbs, right? Your right hand, your left hand. And then all of a sudden it just sort of clicked with me. Why don't we treat the rhythmic aspect of playing guitar like drum instructors treat playing drums? Because it's kind of the same thing. It's heavily focused on rhythm. You're coordinating right hand, left hand, as well as your feet. So what I did was I said, all right, well, I'm going to now approach teaching strumming and teaching timing just like I was taught to play drums. And so I started focusing a ton on the right hand because, I mean, like, honestly, think about when you're strumming your ukulele. You put your left hand on a chord and the left hand just sits there for like what? A measure, 2 measures maybe, but your right hand is just moving away. And then all of a sudden you got to move your left hand, right? But you're still, your right hand, that's where all the action is. So it's kind of weird that why aren't we focusing on right hand, right?
Yeah, that was my experience exactly.
And you may not even be able to remember this, but observing enough beginner students, what I also noticed is they'll stare at their left hand when nothing is going on with the left hand. If they're playing a chord, right, they'll like intense focus on that left hand, but the right hand is moving like crazy. And you know what I've done with students over the years is, you know, I tell them, like, look at where the action is, right? Focus on wherever you need your visual focus to be. So if you are changing chords, then focus on the left hand. If you're not changing chords, well, you can focus on your right hand, but you don't have to like stare at that left hand until it's time to stare at the left hand. So over time, I created all these exercises and then I expanded on them. I started sharing them with other instructors I was working for at the time. I've since, you know, over the years, shared all of these exercises with instructors that worked for me in my studio. And I wrote a book. And
yeah, you did.
I sort of buried the lead on that one. Right? Surprise. Yeah, so I wrote a book, a strumming book that's focused on just what we're talking about, focusing on strumming and timing and rhythms. So I thought we'd talk about it today because, one, since I wrote a book, I want to sell the book. But I mean, like most of the time, I'm selling it for the most part to students at the rock school. But I do want to make it available to any other instructors who might be in that similar situation where they're thinking like, man, why aren't these method books focused on strumming and timing? So I figured we'd talk about that today.
Cool. Let's do it.
So now you've looked through the book.
Yeah, I did. I have a copy.
And we haven't even talked about this.
No.
I am curious what your first impressions or maybe thoughts are on it. Does it suck? Is it horrible?
No, I love it. No, actually, my husband and I went through it together too. It's great. Each part is really clear. Someone like me, you know, with my ukulele history, you know, experience in mind, went through it. And yeah, I was like, why wasn't there? Why hadn't I found this, you know, when I was trying to learn the instrument? Very clear. I like it. And the cover's super cool too. I like the cover.
We did talk about the cover on one of our previous episodes. So the book is I mean, it's really starts from beginners, but some of those, I don't know if you looked at any of the rhythms in kind of the near the end.
Oh, yeah.
Because it starts at whole notes, right? It starts very basic, like here's how you create a chord. Here's how you play a whole note. Here's how you strum a whole note. Here's how you coordinate chord changes using whole notes. But when you get into kind of the end of the book, because it goes through then eighth note strumming, which you're utilizing like downs and ups, and then 16th note rhythms. When you get to the end, those rhythms are like pretty complex.
Yeah, no, that caught my eye at the end because everything else in those beginning chapters, like you said, are easy. And then at the end, I was kind of air strumming, like, how do I do that? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Satisfying trying to learn those more difficult rhythms.
Well, and I would guess you probably, looked through it in like a day or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas with students, oftentimes it can take months.
Oh, yeah, I can see
or
that.
more to get to those 16th notes. But the idea is that it really builds on itself. So starting from whole notes and focusing on that right hand, and then working on chord changes with whole notes and mastering that stuff before then moving on. And there's the first section is all whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and then rests in there as well. So mastering that stuff before going to eighth notes. And by the time you get to eighth notes, I don't have any songs in the book, but there's a big section on like, these are some real rhythms that students and musicians use for playing songs. So I highly recommend doing songs, and that's what I've done with students. But in addition to just the book, which I think is helpful for students, because I started sharing these exercises with other instructors and instructors that work at my studio, really what I then looked at is like, well, this stuff is great, but how you teach it is also important, because I don't want it to be just mechanical. I want students to be able to, like, number one, obviously strum and change chords, translate that to songs. But I want their knowledge to kind of build so that they understand when they go from, playing quarter notes to eighth notes. They understand how to count.
Yeah.
That's a big, I guess, pet peeve of mine when it comes to guitar tabs. So you mentioned you looked up some tabs when you were playing ukulele. There's almost, like, so often there's no rhythm associated with
it. Yeah.
You know? It's like, here are the chords, and you get this messy, like, online tablature. And on almost every one, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but it'll say something like, just look at this, listen to the song, and put it together. Right? So it's that lack of understanding note value and counting and rhythm. And so that's kind of what I needed to really express to the instructors I was giving these exercises to, was like, yes, you're using these exercises to teach the students the mechanics of it, but here's what we can do to make sure that, one, they're understanding how to count rhythms. So as they progress, that counting isn't a hang up. Because when you get to like 16th note rhythms, a lot of guitar instructors will focus on saying like down and up, right? Down, down, up, down, down, up, down, right? Which I think when you're in eighth notes, you can do that. But then you transfer to 16th notes, and you've got potentially 16 places in a measure where you're either strumming down, or you're strumming up, or you're hitting the strings, or you're missing the strings. And like, all of those downs and ups just sort of get lost. So being able to count a 16th note rhythm so that then you can translate it to what you're supposed to play on guitar, I mean, in my opinion, it's like almost impossible if you're not counting.
Yeah. Counting is important. And I think that's a great thing you do in this book. Like you said, you start with the basics and you do a really good job of scaffolding that knowledge as they go through chapter to chapter.
Yes.
Yes.
So what I also put together for the book for instructors to use is an instructor companion guide. It's almost like a training. And I mean, this is what I've given to my instructors. The other thing that I wanted to kind of impress upon instructors when they use this is in sort of analyzing how I've always taught students, I realize over time, because so many students learn different ways, I needed different ways to make sure that they understood these concepts. So almost organically, I developed kind of this 3-part process, and that's laid out in the companion guide. And I even call it the process. So the 3 parts, and this is not actually in the book, but the 3 parts for the process that is in the instructor companion guide.
Yeah.
The first one is visual. And I think that's a couple different things. One, it's making sure the student sees the notes, right? They see the rhythmic value of each one of those notes. But the visual aspect of the process is writing the counting underneath the notes, right? So if you have a whole note, you're writing 1, 2, 3, 4, circle the 1, because that's the note you're going to strum on. If you're strumming half notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, line up the 1 under the first half note, line up the 3 under the second half note, and you circle those, because those are visual cues for the student to latch onto.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part of the process. The second part of the process is audiation. And that involves getting the student counting, right?
Yep.
I mean, I know you're big on that.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Getting the student counting that rhythm with you so that when they go to translate to that playing on their guitar, they're already kind of hearing it in their head.
In their head.
Yeah.
They have to hear it in their head.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part of the process is kinesthetics. Now, I'd say like this is light because we're not getting up and, jumping around.
Yeah.
But there's a mechanical and a physical aspect of it where your right hand has to be moving, right? And what I've always done with students is I get that right hand moving and I make sure they're counting, right? So they have those 3 aspects. They're seeing what's on the page. They're counting it out. So they're encouraging the audiation. They're hearing it in their heads while they're also moving their hand. Mm-hmm. When I work with students, I have them do all of those things before I even have them strum.
Yeah.
So they're going through the motions and building up the muscle memory and connecting the dots on all of that stuff before they're even strumming.
Yes.
So
I love that. I really appreciate the 3 different styles. Like, that's great, because we've talked about this before. I'm really visual. If I'm having trouble with a musical passage, I got to see it. Right? Mm-hmm. So some student might be seeing those half notes as they're strumming, and that helps them. They see it in their head, right?
Yeah.
And shoot, if you do have a more kinesthetic learner, have them stand for a second and put it in their feet if you want, or something, or air strum to get that in their right hand, right? Mm-hmm.
And I think with many students, especially if you're starting with a beginner, you don't know what their learning style is.
Yeah.
And having all these bases covered, the likelihood that you're going to hit on something that resonates with them and gets them to understand it, I think is higher than if you kind of always teach something the same way.
Yeah.
Right. And students don't always advocate for themselves.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially the younger ones, for sure.
They don't always say, I don't understand it, or like, I'm having a hard time understanding how you're explaining this in this way. Mm-hmm. But if throughout all of this process, you're explaining it 3 different ways, in many different ways, they're more likely to pick up on whatever it is resonates with them and gets them to understand it. And even when they understand it, they might not even be able to articulate like, oh, I didn't get it when we were writing it out. I didn't get it when we were counting it out loud. But man, when I moved my hands, that's when I got it.
Feel it. Mm-hmm.
Like they might not even say that.
Yeah. It may help you as the instructor too, start to learn what their learning style is.
Bingo. Yeah. Right? Because when you have them do all this stuff with you and you become the observer, then yes, you can start to pick up on what it is about this process that does resonate with them and how you can then get them to strum the way you need them to strum, right? And and it's all about momentum. When you hit on that aspect of their learning that they understand, then they can build on it.
Yeah. I love that. Yep. You learn how they learn. And it's my opinion that you wouldn't focus on just one. You know, if they're more visual than kinesthetic, you wouldn't do everything visually. You'd still provide all three approaches, but lean more heavily on the one that clicks with them.
Yeah, because I think two things happen, right? One, you're going to pick up on what works for them. So that's good. Like you said, lean into it. But like how they learn is also evolving. So if they understand how to, I mean, we'll take it really simply. If they look at a whole note and just instinctually, they're like, sure, I know how to do this. It's a whole note. I see it. It's right there. And they play it. That's fine. As they progress and their learning evolves, they may start to, they may need audiation when they get to the eighth notes. So I think by giving them all of those options, their learning can evolve and it can build on itself, right? So if one style resonates with them, you don't want to ignore the others because the others are going to reinforce also what's going on. And I do put the downs and the ups, but like I still focus on the counting.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of like when we were talking about the downs, like down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and that's how I do it. So the downs and the ups are on the page so that they can visually see which way they're supposed to go. But the counting is going to help them to keep track of where they are. Because when we do add chord changes, if a student is so focused on downs and ups, well, what differentiates one down from another down, right? But if they know that the chord change is on the 1, then when they have that 1 come up, they know, well, that's when I change from my D to my E minor or whatever the case is. Yeah.
Nice.
Do you think, I put this in my outline, do you think you'd be able to teach someone guitar?
Oh my God.
If I gave you all of this? I mean, if not, that's fine. But I'm just curious.
I love a good instructor guide. What you provided here, this companion guide for instructors is pretty great. I don't know. You're putting me on the spot. I don't know if I could teach someone or not.
I thought about having you try to teach me guitar on the spot.
Oh my gosh. Don't do that to me, John. Everything is here. If I had really limited guitar skills, I mean, this would totally set me up to teach guitar. Absolutely. If I could play anything on the guitar, which I can't, I can play nothing. This is really great. And I think this instructor companion is it. I love the way everything is lined out in here so that you and it's not too long. I mean, it's concise, but it takes you through, the first, they're not really chapters, but the first section, establishing your process with visual and audiation and kinesthetic. And I will say that the instructor companion guide it borders on redundant, but I did that on purpose. Yeah. It borders on redundant because
I'm big on reinforcing that process so that the students expect, like, okay, first we're going to write out the rhythm, then he's going to make me count it out loud, then we're going to move our hand while we're counting, and then we're going to get to play. So that's the case from when you start with whole notes all the way through when you're doing these complex rhythms into 16th notes.
Yeah.
Every time you have a new rhythm, you're going through that same process. So that's why the instructor guide is so redundant, because I go through each one of those sections and say, here's what you do to visualize. Here's what you do to audiate. Here's what you do for the kinesthetics. So I think the instructor guide, it's like, I think 14 pages, 15 pages, something like that. It could be much, much shorter if you realize, like, oh yeah, it's redundant. I'm just doing the same thing. I mean, I probably could have scaled it back to about 5 pages.
I like this though. I think this is great because it really takes the instructor step by step. I mean, redundancy, I get it. Repetition is good. Repetition is good. Repetition is good. And you're emphasizing that, like, you're establishing these habits at the beginning. Whole notes are easy. Yeah, we get it. But you're going to need these processes by the time you get to 16th notes.
Well, yeah. And I did go back and forth on when I was writing the companion guide. Do I make it redundant like this? Ultimately, I did, because I know when I've given this stuff to my student instructors who are kind of brand new to teaching, they need that redundancy as me training them to teach, so that they provide that redundancy for students when they're learning. Yes, a more experienced instructor maybe doesn't need to go through as much, but I'm literally giving this instructor companion guide and the book to some of my instructors who are 17 years old and starting to teach kids. They've never taught before. They've been taught, so they see how their instructors do it. But, something gets lost in that photocopy of a photocopy. So I wanted to make sure that I can give this to any of my instructors, whether they've been teaching for 5 years or whether they've never taught before, and they feel confident in how they can go into that lesson and teach a kid how to strum and ultimately play songs and work on their chord changes and their timing. So that's why it's the instructor companions.
I think that's smart. Yep.
I feel like this has been a long commercial.
No, it's interesting.
I didn't want it to seem like a commercial, but what I do want to do for listeners is I'm gonna give away books to listeners. I'm gonna give away books and these instructor companion guides. So any of our listeners who wants a copy of the book and a copy of the instructor companion guide, I'm going to game it a little bit though. I'm going to make them give us a review.
There you go. Okay.
I'll make them give us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Then send an email, info@rockschoolproprietor.com. And, say hi in the email too. Like, hey, I gave you this review. I teach here, because I'd love to hear from the instructors, and then I'll send them a copy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I should say, I can't do this indefinitely, right? So I think what we'll do is this will be through the end of July 2025.
Yeah, perfect.
So as you're listening to this through the end of July 2025, give us a review or rating on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Send us an email, info@rockschoolproprietor.com. Say hi, and then tell me where to send the book and the companion guide, and I'll send it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously my hope is if people love it, cool. I've got more, and instructor discounts will be available if people want to use it with students, so that then they can, sell it to their students or the materials fee or whatever, and they'll make a little bit of money for themselves. I am working on video training for this as well. I realized with my instructors, some of them need the video training in addition to the instructor companion guide. So that'll happen. But for now, the book and the companion guide.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining me for this commercial, Mandy.
No, it's great. It's so good and so generous. Email us.
Yeah.
Email us. John will send you a book.
Yes.
Cool.
That'll do it then for
Awesome.
this episode. We'll see you next time.
All right. Take care, John.
Bye. Once again, if you want to get a free copy of Complete Guitar Strumming, go over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a rating and review. Then send us an email at info@rockschoolproprietor.com. I'll send you a free copy of the book and the instructor companion guide. Say hi and tell me a little bit about your studio too while you're at it. We love to hear from listeners. I'm at rock.school.proprietor on Instagram if you'd like to connect with me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Blue Sky as John Kozicki. If you've enjoyed the show and gained insight from our conversation, then we count that as a win. All we ask in return is that you pay it forward, share the show with someone you think needs to hear it.